So you want to learn how to use Next.js 13? Well, you have come to the right video because that's exactly what you will learn today. This video is separated into two parts. In the first part we will learn the basics of Next.js. In the second part we will build a real application as you see in the background, which will be a movie application. In the first part we will learn how routing works, so how nested routing works, how dynamic routing works, how layout routes work, and so on. And on the second part we will learn how to fetch data, how to post data, how to revalidate that data, and much more. So strap in, let's check out the demo, and let's go. On my screen right now you see what we built today. So we have a movie application with the trending movies that we fetch from an API. I can click on any movie, so let me click on Mission Impossible right here. You see we get redirected to /movie / the ID of the movie, so we work with nested routing and dynamic routing. We have a little bit of info about the movie, and on the right side we can share our own opinion about the movie. So what I can do right now is add a comment, so let's say hey from this video. Then I can click on add comment, which has a pending state. We see the comment gets revalidated and we see it right here on the bottom. So that's what we built today. I hope you have fun. We will learn all of the basics about Next.js. So now let's go. So to get started, I'm right now on the Next.js homepage and I would highly suggest you guys to read through this website since in my opinion it's very informative and you will learn also a lot about Next.js, what it's made out of and what the positives are of Next.js. And now to get started, what I will do right now is click on Get Started. And right here you have an introduction about Next.js, the main features, and also what has changed with the server components, for example. And now for us to get started, right here click on Installation, and maybe let me zoom in a bit for you guys. And then right here you will pretty much see the recommended way to create a new Next.js application. So let me just copy that right now. Let me go back to my terminal and let me cd into my desktop directory, cd into my YouTube directory, and paste that command. So now you will see the CLI will ask me for a name, and for the name let me just do a Next.js tutorial. Then I will click enter. It will now ask me if I want to use TypeScript. I will definitely click yes. But if you don't want to use TypeScript, click no, because the tutorial will be pretty much the same. Then for ESLint, I will also click yes. For Tailwind CSS, I will also click yes, since I think that's way better than just normal CSS. We won't use the source directory, we will use the app router, and we won't customize the default import alias. So now I will click enter and this will now install for me. So once that's finished, I will just come back. Next.js has now finished installing as you see right here, and I will now go back to my Visual Studio Code, and as you see I already opened the project, and if you want to do the same just click on File and click on Open Folder. And right here on the right side in the sidebar you pretty much see the structure of a Next.js application, or in that sense a blank Next.js application. So let me go through the files first of all. First of all, we have a tsconfig, that's just the configuration file for TypeScript, so that's nothing important for us or nothing new in that sense. Then we have a tailwind.config.js file, and this file is pretty much there because we have chosen to install Tailwind CSS with our project. And as you see, Next.js already ships with some pretty much default styles. I don't want that, so let me just delete this background image since I won't need that. Then the next file is the readme, that's pretty standard stuff. Post CSS is pretty much used for Tailwind CSS. And then we have in package JSON and in package log JSON, so we have our packages and the logged packages. Then the next file is the next.config.js. That's pretty much the configuration file for Next.js. Right now we won't pretty much use it, but at a later stage of this tutorial, we'll have to pretty much set in flag, so a specific feature of Next.js to true, but you will see that later. For now, all you have to know is pretty much that that is the configuration file of Next, or for our application in that sense. Then we have in git ignore and ESLint files, so nothing new. Now the interesting stuff right now comes. So we have this public folder, and inside of the public folder, you pretty much store static files. So images, SVGs, everything that's pretty much static. Then we have our node modules, so nothing interesting. And now pretty much the most used and the most interesting stuff, or the folder just now comes, and that's the app folder. So our app folder is pretty much where we create our routes and all of our utilities. And now let's start up from the bottom, and that's the page.tsx file. And the page.tsx file right now in that sense is our index page. So what you can do right now is start our dev server. So open your terminal and run npm 1 dev. And this will now start your dev server on localhost 3000. So let me go to localhost 3000. So I'm now on localhost 3000, and right here you see pretty much the index page, so localhost 3000. And if I go back, that's pretty much the file that is the index page. So what I will do right now is actually just delete everything inside of the return statement, and let's just create an h1 tag, and inside of here let's just say hello from the index page. If I now save that and go back, you pretty much see right here that that's our index page. So if we go further, the next file is our layout file, and the layout file is pretty much the root layout. So every file, or every, in that sense, route inside of our app folder is being wrapped inside of this layout. So just to make it clear, what I can do right now inside of this body, I can create an h1 tag and say right here, h1 hello from the root. If I now save that and go back, you right here see hello from the root and our index page. So all this layout function in that sense does, or this layout file, it wraps all of our pages inside of here. So that's our root layout. Now we only have one root layout, and that's always pretty much the top layout file inside of the app folder. And that's why also this function pretty much has an export default function root layout. So now I think you understand that. And now the next file we have is the globals.css. And right here we pretty much just initialize Tailwind CSS. And again, you see Next.js ships with a default pretty much styling for the default template. Let me just delete that since I don't need that. And then you see the next file is just the fav icon. This right now is just the Vercel icon, but of course you can change that to your icon. So in production, if I go back, you will have right here your own fav icon. Now, if I again go back to layout.tsx, we have a few more interesting functions in that sense. First of all, we have right here this const inter. So what is that exactly? Well, in the default template, right now Next.js just ships with this inter font. So Next.js has this cool font package. With that, you can preload fonts from Google, for example, and you don't have any layout shifts for that in that sense. Now, I won't really explain how to configure Next fonts. Lee Robinson, for example, has a cool introduction video how to make it work. I mean, it's not very hard, but we won't really use it, so I won't go any further with that. Now, the more interesting function we have right here in the layout function is the metadata function right here. So you export that, you give it a type of metadata, which you import from Next, and inside of here you can pretty much give meta tags. So right now we have, for example, a title of create next app. And if I go back to localhost 3000, so if you look right here on the top, you see the title create next app. So if I change that, so let's just say hello to this tutorial, and if I save that and go back, you see that our title has changed to hello to this tutorial. I can also change the description, so let's just say hello description, and if I now save that, I will have to open the dev tools from Chrome, and right here inside of the elements, let me first of all zoom in a bit. You will then see right here inside of this head tag, and if you scroll down a bit, you will see a meta of description with the content of hello description. So that's how you create pretty much meta tags. All you have to do is an export a function called metadata. Then if you use TypeScript, you give it a type of metadata to get types, but that's definitely not required, so you don't have to do that. but that's pretty much the gist of how to create a metadata function and how to pretty much configure metadata or tags in that sense. Also, of course, you could give it right here also an OG title, an OG image, so open graph image, everything like that. We won't do that, but definitely check out the documentation since it's very detailed. You will see how to do that. But just for the basics, that's how you create a title and how to create a description. And now I think you pretty much understand what Next.js ships with and what the default template actually means in that sense. So I think we can now actually continue and learn a bit about routing. So let's do that right now. So if I go back to localhost 3000, let me close my DevTools. And what you see right now is again our layout right here with hello from root. And we have our index page with hello from index page. First of all, let me change our layout to just say hello from the navbar. So in that sense, we want the navbar to always be on top, and we want to clearly distinguish it. So I can also give it a class name. Let's say class name bg red 500. And if I now go back, you see on top we have a navbar, and then right here our child is our index page. But what if I want to create another page? So let's say a page which is just /sales or /contact or /dashboard. So it's pretty easy actually with Next.js. Right here you have your app folder, and inside of the app folder pretty much the logic of your application lives. So right here you create your routes. And how do you create a route? So it has changed a bit with, for example, Next.js 12. And what you have to do now is actually create a folder. So we create a folder and you give it the name of your URL in that sense, or the segment. So if you want to create a dashboard route, you will just name the folder right here, dashboard. So let me pretty much spell that. And now if I go back and if I go to /dashboard, you will see that we actually see nothing. So right now it pretty much loads, but you will see we get a 404 not found. And why is that? Right now, we first of all don't export a default function, but we are also missing one important file. And to make it work, you will have always to create a new file called page.tsx. So you pretty much have to create a folder with the name of the route, but you will also have to create a page.tsx where you have your pretty much UI. So now if I go back and still reload the page, so let me do that, you will still see nothing. So we only have a blank screen. We don't want that. We actually want to show something. So what you will have to do right here is export a default function and right here give it a name. So let's just say dashboard and let me open that function. Inside of here, let me just return something. So let's do a div with an h1 and let's say hello from, let's say dashboard. If I now save that and go back and if I reload that, you will right now see we have in localhost 3000 /dashboard. So we are on the dashboard route. You still see on the top we have our root layout, which is the navbar, but the content of the page has changed. So we have hello from dashboard. And if I go back to localhost 3000, so our index page, we still have the layout, so our root layout of the navbar, but right here we show our children, which is the index page. So that's pretty much how routing works in the basic form. You create a folder and you create a page.tsx file. So let me show it again to you. If I now go into the app folder again and let me create a new file called sales, and if I now go back and go to localhost 3000 /sales, you'll again see a 404 not found. Why is that again? That's because we haven't created a new page.tsx file. So inside of the sales folder, let me create a new file called page.tsx. And right here again, you will have to do an export default function, give it a name of, let's say, sales, and let me open that function. Inside of here, I will now return a div and an h1 where I will say hello from the sales route. If I now go back and go to /sales and reload that page, you see we have again our nested or our root layout, and we have our hello from sales route. So that's pretty much the gist of the basic routing. You create a folder and you create a page.tsx. But let's say now you want to create nested routing. So nested routing pretty means that you have multiple segments in that sense. So right now we have localhost 3000 / dashboard. But what if dashboard has a child route? So let's say dashboard / settings. What if we want to pretty much show it like that? If I now click enter, you will again see in 404 not found, and that's because we haven't created nested routing. And to make nested routing work, it's actually pretty easy. Go in any folder. So let's just do right now the dashboard folder. And inside of the dashboard folder, I want to now create a settings route. So again, what you will have to do is create a new folder now inside of the dashboard folder, not inside of the app folder, because we want to do nested routing. And now just name it settings. Now inside of the settings folder, you will again have to pretty much create the page file, because right now if I again pretty much reload the page, we still get in 404 not found. So inside of the settings folder, create a new file called page.tsx. And inside of here, do an export default function, which will just be called settings, and then open that function. Inside of here, I will now return a div with an h1 and say hello from the nested route called settings, something like that. And if I now go back and reload the page, you see right here, hello from the nested route called settings. And the URL is localhost 3000 / dashboard / settings. So that's pretty much how nested routing works in that sense. So you create one folder, and then inside of this folder, you create another folder with the page.tsx file. And right now you see that's just pretty much, we have just created one child called settings, but you can make it definitely much longer. So for example, /dashboard / settings / comments / whatever you want, you will always have to create another folder inside of the folder you want to nest inside of. I hope that's clear. I hope you understand that. And now I think we are pretty much now done with basic routing. So we know how to create the level 1 routing where we just have a / route. And now we have created nested routing. Now the next thing I want to do is dynamic routing. So for example, later in our application, we'll have a movie application where if we click on a movie, it will pretty much redirect us to the /movie /ID. And the ID is dynamic, so it can be a variable, it can be 1 or 500, whatever the ID of the movie is. So to make pretty much dynamic routing work, let's do it again inside of dashboard, and let's create now a new folder. And what you will have to do now is use square brackets, which you use, for example, inside of arrays, and give it a name. So inside of the square brackets, I will just do an ID. And now if I do inside of here again in page.tsx and do an export default function called, let's say, dynamic. And let me just open that function and let me return pretty much a div. And inside of here, I will do an h1 with hello dynamic. If I now save that and go back and change the /dashboard / settings to, let's say, /dashboard / 555. And if I click enter, right now you'll see hello from dynamic. But I can do a few more things. For example, I can get the param right here from the URL pretty much and show it right here in my UI. So how do I do that? Right here, you pretty much have to destructure the params. And right now, TypeScript will complain that it does not know what params are. So right now, the params are pretty much of type any. So let me just pretty much tell TypeScript what the types are, since I know that it will be an ID of type string. So inside of here, params will be of type pretty much ID, which will be in string. And what I can do now is right here, just pretty much show my params.id. And if I now save that and go back, you pretty much see hello dynamic 555. So we show pretty much the param right here. So I can change the 555, for example, to hello. And right here we see hello dynamic hello. So that's pretty much our param. And if I now go back, you probably wonder why do I say params.id? And that's because if I open my Explorer again, we named our dynamic route ID. So if I would rename ID to, let's say, what can I name it? To ABC. then what I would do right here is first of all, let me update the imports. Right here, we wouldn't get an ID anymore. We would get the ABC. And right here, then it wouldn't be anymore params.id, but params.abc. If I now save that and go back, you would still see that everything works. We only have changed pretty much the name of the dynamic route. So that's pretty much the simple gist of creating dynamic routing. And again, I can change it again to an 6.5 or something like that. And you still see the params right here. So now that's pretty much the gist of routing. So we now know how to create basic routes, we know how to create nested routing, and we know how to make dynamic routing work. But one thing that we currently don't know how to make work is layout routes. So right now, let me zoom in a bit. I think that's not big enough for you guys. We have our route layout right here, our navbar. But what if our dashboard route right here should also get a layout? So our navbar is right now our route layout. It will be there on every route we create. It is pretty much static in that sense. But what if I want to create a layout that's only applicable to the dashboard route? What you will have again to do is pretty much go into the app folder and go into the dashboard folder. And now inside of the dashboard folder, you can create a new file, and that's now something different than page.tsx, since you will now create a layout.tsx. And this layout is pretty much right now will wrap everything that is inside of this dashboard. So this layout will in that sense wrap our page, so our index page of dashboard. It will wrap our settings page, and it will wrap our dynamic page. And now to make it, to show it to you so that you understand it better, let's again start off with an export default function. Let's just name it layout. Let me open that function. And then inside of here, let me return a div with an h1 with hello from the dashboard, let's say layout. If I now save that actually and go back to our localhost 3000, and let me just open the /layout. You'll right now see hello from the dashboard layout. But actually that's not what I wanted to see. What I wanted to see right now is our index page. Because if I open my Explorer again, right here we have an hello from dashboard. And that's actually what I want to see right here. And it does not work because we don't pass our children inside of here. Since if I open my root layout right here, you see right here that we pass our children. And because of the children, we can then pretty much show the index page and every other page. And we have to do the same pretty much with our layout inside of the dashboard folder. So inside of our function, just destructure the children. And you will again see that we get a TypeScript error. And that's because TypeScript does not know what type children is. So let me tell it the type, since children will be of type React Node. React Node is imported from React. And now under this h1, just pass the children. And if I now go back to localhost 3000, you will now see our root layout, which is pretty much inherited from the layout.tsx file inside of our app folder. Then we have hello from the dashboard layout. This is now the layout we have created inside of the dashboard folder. And we have hello from the dashboard. And hello from the dashboard is our index page. Now you can also see it if I now go to the settings route. So to /dashboard/settings, you will still see we have our navbar, we have our layout for the dashboard, so hello from the dashboard layout, and we have our settings route, so hello from the nested route called settings. And this will also work with our dynamic values. So if I do dashboard/555, you will see hello from the navbar, hello from the dashboard layout, and now right here our file, which is pretty much our dynamic route right here. So hello dynamic 555. So that's pretty much how you create layouts. But now we'll have an interesting thing. If I go back to localhost 3000, so let me just do that right now, you'll see we don't have this dashboard layout anymore. And that's because our index page does not live inside of this dashboard folder. So our layout inside of this dashboard folder is only applicable to the children inside of this folder. So inside of this route in that sense. So every other route, so if I go back to sales, so /sales, you'll see I won't get this layout. So I hope you understand that. to make another example, what I can do is go into the sales pretty much route, and also inside of here I can create a layout.tsx. If I now go back to the layout inside of our dashboard and just copy that and go inside of the layout in our sales folder and paste that, and let me change the h1 to hello from the sales layout, and let me save that and go back. You right now see that sales has its own layout now, hello from the sales layout. And maybe let me change the color. So right here I will do class name bg, let's say green 500. And if I now go back, you will see our navbar is red and our sales layout is green. And if I go to the layout inside of the dashboard and also give it a background color of class name bg blue 500, and if I now open the dashboard route, so /dashboard, you will see that our layout has changed to the blue background and to the text of hello dashboard layout. So isn't that cool? You have now learned how to create basic routing from the top level. You have learned how to create nested routing. You have learned how to create layout routes, and you have learned how to create dynamic routes in that sense. So that's, in my opinion, very cool. And right now I can actually also show you how, again, the meta function works. So if I again go to the root layout right here, and let me just copy this meta function, and let me go right now inside of the index dashboard page. So right here inside of the dashboard folder, go to page.tsx, and now above our default function, let me paste that. Let me import this metadata type, and let me change the title, let's say to hello from the dashboard. And if I now save that and go back, you will see that the title has changed to hello from the dashboard. And if I now go back to localhost 3000, our meta title changes to hello to this tutorial. So that's great. You see that works. You now know the basics. So now let's just actually jump into the cool stuff. So our movie application. So what I have now done is pretty much delete the both folders, so the dashboard folder and the sales folder, since I want to start off fresh. And now I think the first thing I will actually do is change our layout. So I want to create a cool navbar. So let me first of all delete this h1 tag, since I won't need that. And what I want to do now is inside of this body tag, let me create a nav element. Let me style that. So let's give it a class name of px of 10 and padding top of 5. And then inside of here, I want to use a link. And now the link is actually something new. I haven't talked about that. And that's how you pretty much make linking work in that sense. So for example, if you want to link from the home page to a sales page, you use the link which you import from next/link. So let me import that right now. And now inside of here, let me give it the name of Marshall. Let's give it a span. And inside of the span, I want to do db. Let me style that span. So let's give it a class name of text teal 500. Right now, if I save that, you see that TypeScript complains, and it tells me that right now the property href is missing. So what you have to do always, if you use the link, is give it an href. So where do you want to link to? And I want to link to the index page, so I will just do an href to the slash page. What I want to do also is style that, so let me give it a class name of text 2xl, and let's do a font which will be semi-bold. If I now save that and go back, you will right here see pretty much our navbar with our logo in that sense. And if I hover over it, on the bottom left corner, you see localhost 3000. So it pretty much links to localhost 3000, so our index page. And that's how linking works. For example, I could change the href to /sales. And if I now hover over my logo, you will see that it links to localhost 3000 /sales in the bottom left corner. So that's pretty much the gist of that. And you can do actually another cool thing inside of the link component, and that's to use the prefetch property. And all prefetch pretty much tells the link is, if I hover over it, it should pretty much fetch all the data in the background. So right now there's nothing to fetch. So if I open the DevTools and go right here to the network tab and hover over my logo, you will see we don't have any network activity. But later on, I will show you if I hover over the logo, you will pretty much see that we will have data which will be prefetched in the background. So now let me go back, and I think we are actually now done with that. We have created our logo, in that sense our root layout, and now we can actually continue with the index page. So let's do that right now. So I'm now again in the index page, so in the page.tsx file in the app folder. And right now let me just delete this return statement and let me create a new return. And the first element I want to use is the div element. Let me style that. So let's give it a class name of bg white. Padding y will be 6, sm will be padding y of 8, and lg will be padding y of 12. Inside of this div I want to create another div. And let me style that. So let's give it a class name of mx, which will be auto, max width, which will be screen of, let's say, 2xl. Then I will also want to have a padding x of 4 and a medium of padding x of 8. Then inside of this div, let me create another div and let me style that. So let's give it a class name, which will be margin bottom of 10 and medium, which will be margin bottom of 16. Inside of this div, I want to create an h2 tag. And let's just say right here, top trending movies, just like that. I can now also style that. So let's give it a class name of margin bottom, which will be 4. We'll have a text, which will be center. So let me spell that correctly. We'll also have a text, which will be 2xl, a font, which will be bold, and text, which will be gray 800. And we'll also have a medium, which will be margin bottom of 6. And a large, which will be text of, let's say, 3xl. If I now go back right now, you will see our logo on the top and the title of top trending movies. Let me zoom out a bit because that's too big in my opinion. Now that looks better. And now I think we can actually continue since the navbar works and the title of our index page also looks great. So if you can remember from the demo, we will pretty much want to show the top trending movies. And I don't have the top trending movies. I don't know what the top trending movies are. And for that, I will use a cool API, which is provided by the movie database. It's free, it's easy to use. So that's why I will use that. What you will have to do first of all is click on login and sign up and do everything like that. And once you're logged in, click on settings and then scroll down to API right here on the left sidebar. And right here you will see your API read access token. That's what we will need in a second, so copy that and store it somewhere since we will need it in a few seconds. And now the next URL which we'll need is pretty much the docs of the developer database. So I'm right here at the API reference tab and I've scrolled down to trending and clicked on movies since I want the trending movies. What I will do right now is click right here on the language, which will be Node.js. And for authentication, add the key right here, which you have just copied. I haven't done that, so let me do that and paste it inside of here. So right here, you pretty much see the URL, which will be fetched. You'll see the options and everything like that. And now let me click on try it. And right here, it will pretty much give us a response. And if it's the correct API key, you'll get a 200 with response. If it's not a 200, you probably have copied the wrong key. So do that again and try it again. So now you pretty much see the response, what we'll get, and also the URL you have to fetch from. Now, if I go back, you probably don't know how to fetch data from Next.js 13, since it's now pretty much a bit of a mental change with the React server components. And it's a bit different to, for example, the Next.js 12 release or to the pages folder. So since right now our page.tsx is a server component, it's safe to pretty much fetch data from inside of this route. So we don't have to create an API route or anything like that. We can pretty much fetch data inside of this component. So what you'll have to do is actually just create a function. So let's do an async function, which I will call getData. And inside of here, let me open that. So all you will do pretty much is do all of your fetching inside of this function and then get it pretty much in your front end inside of your home function. So what you will do is go back. Let me copy this const URL right here. Let me go back and let me add it right here. Now, right now, this is only an URL. So what I want to do is an equal await fetch. And inside of the fetch, I will pass this URL just like that. Now, right now, we pretty much will fetch this URL, but this won't work since if you go back, you see right here that we have options. So we have headers in that sense with our authorization or our API key in that sense. So what I want you to do is copy the headers right here, go back, and now I will right here just add my options and paste that inside of here. So right now I pretty much fetch that and I add my headers, so the accept, which will be application JSON, and I add my authorization key, so my barrier key in that sense. So now that's actually all we need. Now, right now, you also, of course, have to return that data. So right now it would be pretty much static and I wouldn't get anything back. So it's pretty much void right now. So what you will do is right here, return URL. And what I want, of course, to do is then .json, since I want the JSON of that. And now I also have to get it somehow in the front end. And that's also pretty easy, since all you have to do is then const data, which will be equal to await get data. So I want to call get data, and with that I will get the data. Now, one thing you already see is that we get an error right here. And if I hover over await, it pretty much tells me that did you mean to make this function async? And yes, to make it work, to fetch the data inside of our component, you will have to make your function async. And now in a normal application with Next.js 12, for example, so without React server components, this of course would not be safe. So that's why it's pretty much safe to do so. Another thing which I can actually do is store my API key in a environment variable. So what I will do right now is go right inside of our root folder pretty much and create a .env file, give it a name of, let's say, the movie database API. And if I go back, let me just copy everything right here. Once that's copied, just paste it inside of here. And now we can pretty much access the env inside of here. So what you will have to do right now is only in process, which will be lowercase, .env, the name which you have named right there. Right here you will also see an error, and it tells me pretty much that it does not know if the process.env, so our environment variable, is in string or not. So what I will do is pretty much an as string. Now this should actually work, and if I now pretty much log the data, so let's do in console.log data, and if I now go back to our localhost 3000, and if I now open my developer tools, and if I now open the console right here, you don't see what you want to see. You don't see the console log of the data. And in the normal Next.js 12 application or in the Next.js 13 application with the pages folder, in theory, you would see it right here. But since Next.js 13 uses, or the app folder uses server components, you will have to open your terminal right here, since the data is server side. And right here, you pretty much see our response and a movie, for example, right here, Spider-Man. So right now you pretty much see that's a pretty big mental change. You don't really work anymore with the client. You much more work with the server in that sense. So that's one hiccup that many people have. They open the console in Chrome and they don't see anything. So bear that in mind. If you use server components, everything you log will be logged inside of the server terminal. But in a later stage, you will also see how to make client interactivity work. So now, for now, let me close my terminal. And what I think I can do now is actually code up a bit of the UI, since we want to show the trending movies inside of here. So what I will do right now is go under the h2 tag and under the div and create a new div element. And let me style that. So let's give it a class name of grid, gap, which will be 4. We'll also have an SM, which will be grid of calls 2. We'll have a medium, which will be gap of 6. And we'll have an LG, which will be of grid calls 3. And we'll also have an XL, which will be grid calls 4. We'll also have an XL, which will be gap of 8, just like that. Now, inside of this div, what I want to do is pretty much map over my movies and show them inside of here. But if I would do that right now, or actually before I do that, if I hover over data, you will see that data is type any. And that's why if I do data, pretty much right like that, data.map, and let's say I get a movie right here and return that, you will see that movie is pretty much of type any. And that's because our data is of type any. And now we don't get any types because we use an API and not Prisma, for example. So we pretty much have to supply our own types in that sense. So what you will have to do is pretty much go back inside of your app folder, and inside of the app folder, create a new file called interfaces.ts. And now inside of this interfaces, I will pretty much just create the types, since if I open my terminal, I see what the types are. So I see we have, for example, an ID right here, we get a title, we get an original language, and so on. So what I will do is right here just export an interface, and I will just name it trending, and I will open that. Now, if you don't want to pretty much do the manual work that I will do right now, just go to my GitHub and copy that. But yeah, I will right now do that. So all of our data, first of all, is stored inside of a results array. So let me do that. And if you want to see that also, go right here to the movie database and to the API. You will see right here in the response that we get a results array with each movie inside of there. So yeah, that's all it is. So right here we have in results. The results is of type array. And inside of here we have multiple objects and we have multiple values. So we have an ID, which is of type number. We have a poster underscore path, and this will be of type string. We'll have a title, which will also be of type string. And we'll have an overview, which will also be of type string. I can now save that and go back to our page.tsx. And right here for the data right now, I can give it a type of trending. So let me import that from our interfaces. And if I now hover over data, you will see that data is of type trending. And now you again also see the next error, and it pretty much tells me that map does not exist on type trending. And that's correct, because let's do it again from the start. We'll have in data.results.map. Inside of here we'll have a movie, and let me return that. So now if I hover over movie, you see we get the types of movie, which is ID, poster path, title, and overview. So now that looks great, and now I can actually code the UI for that. So what I will do is first of all create a new div element, and let me style that. So let's give it a class name which will be flex which will be call. We will have an overflow which will be hidden, and we'll have a rounded which will be LG. Also we have a border and a background which will be white. Inside of here I will now create a link, and the link is imported again from next link, and it's pretty much again just there to link to the URL. So let me import that and let me open that. Right here you will see again the TypeScript complaints, and that's because the href property is missing. So let me add an href, and the href will be pretty much dynamic. So let me use upticks, and we'll have a /movie/ the dynamic value, which will be movie.id, just like that. Also, let me style that link. So first of all, let's give it a class name, which will be of group. We'll have a relative, we'll have a block. Let's also use an age, which will be 48. We'll have an overflow, which will be hidden. And we'll also have an BG, which will be gray 100, and a medium, which will be height of, let's say, 64. Now inside of this link, what I want to do right now is actually just save it. And if I now go back to localhost 3000 first of all, and let me reload the page, you'll see pretty much the blank boxes. And I can pretty much also hover on each right here block in that sense. And in the bottom left corner, you can see the link to every pretty much movie in that sense. So that of course works again. So what I want to do now is show the image. So inside of this link component, I will again use an image component, and the image component is again something which is imported from Next. So that's provided by Next.js or by Vercel in that sense. And the image component is pretty much just the standard image component on steroids. If you want to look at it like that, you can also read more about the image component inside of the docs. So let me just open that right now. So you will see that the image component, which is provided by the Next team, pretty much extends the HTML image tag with some features, for example, size optimization, visual stability, faster page loads, and asset flexibility. So that's pretty much the recommended way to pretty much show images. You could also use the normal image tag if you want to do that, but I won't do that right now. So now our image tag right now complains a bit, and that's because we are missing first of all the source. And we'll also right here miss the alt tag. First of all, let me give it an alt of image, movie, banner, something like that. Let me give it a class name, which will be absolute. We'll have an inset, which will be of 0. We'll have an age of full, width, which will also be full. We will have an object, which will be just cover. We'll have an object, which will be center and transition. And then we'll also have a duration of, let's say right now, we can do either 100 or 200, but I would say 200. And I think we'll also have a group hover, which will have a scale, which will be 110, I think. That looks good. So now the last thing which is missing right now is the source. And the source is interesting since we don't get it in the API response. And that's why, and that's because pretty much the movie database has its own URL for images. So it has this pretty much URL, which will be image.themoviedatabase.org/t/p. Then you give it either in width or you give it just the original, as you see right here. And then you pretty much give it right here the ID or the poster path, I'm sorry. So what I will do right now is just copy this right here. And I will do optics right here and paste that inside of here. Now, of course, I don't want to use this poster path, but I want to use the one which I get from the API. So let me use the dynamic value of movie.poster_path. And if I now save that and go back to localhost 3000, you'll see we get an error. And that's because the width is required, or the property width is required. So what I will do right now is just give it a width and a height. So the width will just be 500 and the height will also be 500. And now in theory that should work. So let me save that and go back. And you will still see we get an error. And if you read through the message, it tells us that the host name image.themoviedatabase.org is not configured under our images in our next.config.js. So now we will have our first pretty much interaction with the configuration file. And inside of here, we will pretty much have to tell Next.js in that sense that we want to use images from the domain of image.themoviedatabase. So what you will have to do inside of here is use the images, and the images will have a domain, and the domain will be an array. And for the array value, let's just copy this image.themoviedatabase.org. Let me paste that. What you will also have to do is restart your dev server. So let me stop that and do npm-1 dev. And let me go back to localhost 3000 and reload the page. So now you see that this works. We get all of the images, and if I hover over them, we have this cool scale effect, which has also this cool transition. So that looks good in my opinion. And what I want to do now is show the title, for example, the overview, and so on. So what I will pretty much do right now is go back to page.tsx and now go under the image tag and under the link tag and create a new div tag. Let me style that. So let's give it a class name of flex, flex which will be 1, flex of call, padding which will be 4, and we'll also have an SM of padding of 6, not 7 but 6. And then inside of this div element, let me use an h2 tag. And inside of this h2 tag, let me first of all style it. So let's give it a class name of margin bottom 2, text which will be large. We'll have a font which will be just semi-bold. We'll have a text which will be gray 800. And I think that's all we need for that. Now for the h2 tag, I actually want to use also a link. So let me again use the link component from next. It will again complain since I have to pass the href. And the href will be again the same as it is right here. So let me copy that just and paste it inside of here. So the href is again just /movie/the movie ID. And now inside of the link component, I want to show the movie title. So let me do a movie.title. And if I now save that and go back, you pretty much see the title of the movie right here. But let me also style that. So if I hover over it, I want to pretty much have I want the text color to change. So right here inside of the link component, I can give it a class name. So let me do that. And for the class name, let's give it a transition property. Let's give it a duration of, let's say 100. Let's also give it a hover, which will be text, let's say teal 500. And let's give it an active of text, let's say teal 600. And now I can save that and I can go back, and you see if I hover over the title, we get this cool pretty much change of color to this teal color. So that looks great. And now the last thing I want to do is show the overview right here on the bottom. So to do that, go under the link component and under the h2 tag and create a new p tag. Inside of the p tag, I want to show the movie.overview. And if I now save that and go back, we see the overview. But I already see two things. First of all, I don't want it to have the black color. I want it to be a bit more grayish. And you see that right here, the overview is, for example, so long, and the overview for Mission Impossible is way bigger, like almost double. So what I will do right now, first of all, give it in color. So let's give it a class name of text, which will be gray 500. And I want to give it a line clamp. So I want the overview of each movie to only be like two or three lines long. So what you will do is in line clamp, and you will have to give it a value of, for example, 3. And if I save that, you will see that each overview is now only 3 lines long. So in my opinion, that now looks great. Everything is consistent. Every overview is only 3 lines long. So that's great. We're now pretty much done with that. I can hover on each movie. I can hover on the title. So that's great. Now I think we can pretty much create a details page of the movie. Or actually, before I do that, what I want to show you actually is, if I reload this page, you see it's pretty much instant. Now, why is it instant? That's because when you fetch data from Next.js inside of your server component, pretty much the data is stale. The data will be on the first request fresh, since you fetch it from the API, but each request which will come after that will be static, so the data will be cached. But I don't want to do that because, for example, in a year, these movies will be outdated and we'll have new trending movies. Or not even in a year, but even in a week, we'll have new trending movies. So what you'll have to do actually is change the cache value. So right now our fetch is the first time fresh, and each subsequent request will be pretty much static. So what you will do right under this headers right here, you will use the next and give it a revalidate tag pretty much. And right here you will now tell it in how many seconds you want to revalidate the data. So inside, let's say 10 seconds. And if I now go back and reload the page, now for the next 10 seconds, every request which will come in, so if I reload the page, each request will now be static. So the data will be pretty much read from our cache in that sense. But then after the 10 seconds, if we get a new request, we'll pretty much load the new data. So now that's pretty much the cool thing. You have the power of being dynamic while having the power to be pretty much static. So you have the speed of being static and the power of being dynamic in that sense. And you can, of course, also change it to revalidate 0. So each request will be in that sense fresh. But I wouldn't really suggest you guys to do that. I think caching a few things is also a great thing to do. So now that looks great in my opinion. And now what I will do is actually click on a movie right now. And if I click on a movie, you will pretty much see we will get in 4 not found. And that's because we haven't created a route for that. So let's do that right now. So to make it work, what you will have to do is go inside of your app folder, and inside of the app folder pretty much create a new route, which will be called, or a new folder in that sense, which will be called movie. And right here you will see that we'll link to /movie/movie ID. So we again have nested routing. So inside of the movie folder, create a new folder with the dynamic value of ID. So again, we use pretty much the square brackets to make dynamic routing work. And now inside of this ID, I will create a new file called page.tsx. And now again, what will you have to do inside of here? You always have to start with an export default function. Let's just name it dynamic, or not dynamic, sorry, but movie ID. Let me open that function. And right here, let me just return an h1 with hello. If I now save that and reload this page, you see that the page pretty much works. We link to /movie/the ID, and it works inside of here. You can again pretty much get the params. So let me destructure the params. And the type of params we will get is an ID which will be of type string. And now inside of here, I can say hello to the param, let's say right here, params.id. And if I save that and go back, you will see hello to the param with the movie ID pretty much. So that works great in my opinion. And now I think we can actually continue with the UI. And I think the first thing I will actually do is pretty much fetch the data. So I'm now again on the movie database API docs right now. And right here you again see pretty much what you will have to do. So you'll have an URL where you pretty much fetch a movie with a specific movie ID. So what I will right now do is pretty much just copy this URL. And now inside of our page.tsx, inside of the ID folder, we will again have to create a pretty much function where we fetch the data. So let's do an async, let's say function called getData, and let me open that function inside of here. Right now, let me paste the URL which I've just copied. And again, what you will have to do is an await, fetch, and inside of the fetch, just pass the URL, just like that. And right here, you also see we have to pass in movie ID. So let me change it to upticks and not normal strings, so we can pass our params inside of here. And to make it work, we first of all have to get the params. So inside of here, let me first of all get the ID, which will be of type string, and let me pass it inside of here. So let's do the dynamic value of ID, just like that. And what you will also have to do again, of course, is add our headers. So right here, just copy the headers and let me go back and let me just add them right here, just like that. Now, again, what you will also have to do is add our revalidate tag, since I don't want to get stale data, but I want to get fresh data. So what I will do right here again is just a next with a revalidate tag of, let's say, 10 seconds. Or actually, we can change it right here to, let's say, 60 seconds. So the data gets revalidated every 60 seconds. Now that looks good. Let me also return that. So let's do a return. Let me spell return correctly. URL.json. That looks good. And now right here inside of our default function, what you will have to do now is a const data, which will be equal to await get data. Now we will see you will get two errors. The first one, we already know about it. It tells us that we have to mark our function as an async function. So do an export default async function. Now the first error is already gone, but we get now a second error, where it tells us that we have to pass an argument. Since right here we pass an argument of ID, and now I also have to pass it right here inside of our getData function. So what I will do right here is just pretty much pass our params.id. And now we don't get any error anymore, and that looks good. But there's again another thing I don't like. When I hover over data, you see data is again of type any. So let me change that. Let me again go to the interfaces right here. And then inside of the interfaces, let me create a new interface. So let's do an export interface. Let me name it movie. Let me open it. We'll have a few fields. So we'll have a title, which will be of type string. We'll have a home page, which will be of type string. Then the next field we'll have is an original underscore language, which will be of string. We'll have an overview, which will also be of type string. And we'll have a release date, which will be also of type string. And then the last field we'll have is the backdrop path, so pretty much an image in that sense, which will be of type string, just like that. Now that looks good. I also don't have to mark it as an array, since it's just a single object. So if I now go back to our page route, let me give it a type of movie. And movie is again imported from our interface. So now that looks good. If I now hover over data, you see data is of type movie. So that looks good in my opinion. And what I want to do now is actually delete this return statement and let me create a new return. Let me start off with a div element. Let me style that. So let's give it a class name, which will be rounded of LG. We'll have a border and a padding of 3. Then inside of this div, I want to give it an h1 tag. And let me first of all style it. So let's give it a class name of text, which will be XL, font, which will be semi-bold, and a margin bottom of 5. And now inside of this return statement, I want to start off with a div. And let me style that. So let's give it a class name of min age of screen. So the min height is 100 viewport height. and the padding will be 10. Inside of this div, I want to create another div, and let me give it a class name of height of 40 viewport height and also relative. And inside of this div, I want to now pretty much show the image of the movie in that sense. So let me again use the image component, which I import from next/image. And inside of here, I want to again give it a source, an alt, and a few other things. So let's start off with the alt tag. We'll just say image of movie. We'll also have to give it now a class name. So it will be an object of, let's say, center, or not center, but cover, W full, and we'll have a rounded of LG. That looks good. And now we'll also have to add a source. And for the source, that's again pretty much the same as inside of our index route. So let me just copy the source right here. And let me go back and paste it inside of here. Now you will see one thing is that we use a width of 500. Let me change that to an original. So with the original tag, I pretty much get the original width and I don't scale it down to width 500. Also right here we get an error, and that's because we don't have a movie.poster path, but a data.backdrop path. Now if I save that and go back to localhost 3000, you will see we get an error, and that's because we don't have a width. But in that example, or in this example, I don't want to use a width, since you see right here our image is wrapped inside of a div with a height. So what I will just do is do a fill, and fill will pretty much just fill the image to the height of the container, or to the dimensions of the container. So if I now go back and reload the page, you still see we get some error. So let me go back and see where I made the error. And I've misspelled original, so let me spell that correctly. Original, just like that. And if I now go back and reload the page, the image will now load a bit. It's pretty big, that's why it takes a bit. In a real-life application, you of course should scale it down, since right now it's pretty huge, but I will just leave it like that right now. And what I want to do now is pretty much also show the title and a few other things. So go under the image tag and under the div tag and create a new h1 tag. And inside of this h1 tag, I want to show the data.title. And if I save that and go back, you right here see the title. Now let me also style that. So let's give it a class name. And for the class name, we'll have a text which will be 4XL. Font will be bold. And we'll also have a text which will be center and a padding top of 5. If I now save that and go back, right here you see our title, which is centered, and it has also a font of bold. So now what I want to do is actually pretty much create a div and create two boxes. So on the left, we will pretty much have a description. So we have the homepage URL, we'll have the pretty much language, overview, release date. And on the right side, I want the user to pretty much create comments. So let me do that right now. So what I will do is go under the h1 tag and I will create a new div tag. Let me style that. So let's give it a class name of lex. We'll have a gap which will be of x10 and we'll have a margin top which will be 10. Inside of this div, let me create two divs and let me also style both divs. So both will have a class name which will have a width of 1/2, so 50%. And inside of here, let me also give it a font medium and then a BG of gray 100. Now let me copy this style and let me paste it also in the other div. So let me do that. And right now, if you save that, and let me also add a string right here. If I now save that and go back, I will have to add a bit of content since we don't have any height right now. So let me do that. If I now go back, you will see we have two boxes. So on the left and on the right. And as I already said, on the left, we will pretty much have the details of the movie. Or right here in this right box, we'll have pretty much a comments field. So let me first of all pretty much style this details page. So what you will have to do right now is inside of this first div, let me delete this HH. And inside of this div, I want to create an h1 tag. And inside of this h1 tag, let me first of all create a span. Let me style that. So let's give it a class name of underline. And let's give it right here a name of home page, colon. And then after the span, I want to use a link component from next link, and I want to give it a name of just link. Now I will have to give it an href, and the href will just be data.homepage. And I want to also open it in a pretty much new window. So let's give it a target of underscore blank. So let me spell blank correctly. And if I now save that and go back, you right here see our homepage with the link. And if I click on the link, we get a new pretty much window where we get the homepage of the movie. So that looks great. So let me continue. So what I want to do now is pretty much under this link, under this h1 tag, actually, I want to create another h1 tag, and let me create a span again. Let me give it a name of original language. And for the styling, let's again give it a class name of, let's say, underline. Then after the span, I want to just show my data.original language, just like that. And let me spell language also here correctly. So just like that, that looks good. If I now go back, we have our link and my original language. Let me also add the colon right here since I forgot that. And now under this h1 tag, I want to create a p tag. Let me again use a span where we just say pretty much overview with a colon. Let me style that. So let's give it a class name of underline. And now after the span, I want to pretty much just show the data dot overview, just like that. If I now save that and go back right now, you will see our overview right here. So that looks good. And now I think the last thing I want to show is the release date. So under the p tag, let me again create a span. Let me give it a class name of underline. And let's give it a value of, let's say, release date colon. And after the span, I will just have the data dot release date. So that looks great. We now have our homepage, our original language, our overview, and our release date. So that looks good. Let me also change the div. So let me delete this background since I don't want to have it right here. So now that's done, I think, actually. And now we pretty much do the interesting stuff, since we have now learned how to make routing work, how to make dynamic routing work in that sense, how we nest our routes, how we fetch our data. But we are missing one pretty important step, and that's how to post data. And I think I want to actually refactor a bit. So right now we have our page.tsx and we render pretty much our stuff inside of here. But we could actually refactor a bit and create a layout function in that sense, or layout route, and pretty much add everything that we have done right here. And then inside of this page.tsx, we can show our comments section. So what you will do right now is go inside of your ID folder, create a new file called layout.tsx. And for now, all you will do actually is just copy everything. And I mean actually everything. And for the page.tsx, what I will do now actually is delete everything and again do an export default function. And let's give it again a name of page. Let me open that and let's do a return of h1 hello, just like that. And let me save the layout. And if I now go back and reload everything, you still see everything works. And in that sense, nothing has changed actually. But what I want to do now is actually right here on the right side, as I already said, show the comment section. And to make it work, you again have to use the children. So right here, I use this HH, but what I want to actually do is right here, show the children. And right now, again, TypeScript complains, and that's because it does not know what type children are, and we also don't get them inside of here. So I want to get the params, and I want to get the children, and now we also have to give it a type. So the children will just be of type React Node, which is imported from React. If I now save that and go back, you will see everything still works, but we now don't get this HH, but we get an hello. And this hello is pretty much this h1 inside of our page.tsx. So I can change that to say hello from the comments. And if I now save that and go back, that's what you actually see. So I think that's a bit complicated for if you see it for the first time. So let me again recap what we have done. We have created a movie folder and we have created a dynamic ID folder. So right here we have pretty much created the basis for nested routing. Then inside of here we have two files, a layout file and a page file. The layout file pretty much fetches the data which is required for the movie. So the details of the movie, the image, the title, and the homepage and everything like that. And then right here, pretty much we pass our children, and the children right now is pretty much our page.tsx. And I can add whatever I want inside of this page.tsx, so any gibberish, and right here it will pretty much reflect inside of our layout. So that's what we have done actually right now. It's actually pretty simple, it's nothing really complex, but I think if you see it for the first time, it can go over your head a bit. And what I want to do now, as I already said, is pretty much store comments or create comments inside of here, post them to our database, revalidate them, and everything like that. So we have pretty much now covered the first step of Next.js, so fetching data, routing, and everything like that. But now we also have to pretty much somehow learn how to post data, how to revalidate data, and everything like that. So the first thing I will actually have to do is open a terminal and let me stop the dev server. And I will have to install Prisma. So let me do an npm i uppercase D Prisma. And right here, I pretty much install Prisma as a development dependency. And I will also need to install the Prisma client. So let me do an npm i add Prisma / client. Once that's installed, all you have to do is do an npx Prisma init. And this will pretty much initialize Prisma for us. So now Prisma has created pretty much 2 files for us, or actually only 1 folder in that sense. So in the .env, it has added a database URL, which is right now just empty, or not empty, but it isn't really an actual database URL. And it also has created a Prisma folder with an empty schema. And now, first of all, what I want to do is actually create a database. So let me go to PlanetScale. So I'm now on planetscale.com, and planetscale.com is pretty much a database provider which works with MySQL, and also it also has the cool feature that it uses Vitess, and Vitess pretty much enables this platform to scale pretty much infinitely, and YouTube, for example, also uses Vitess. So what I will do right now is first of all click on sign in, and then right here I will click on create to create a new database. And then I will have to give it a database name. And for the database name, let's just say Next.js. For the region, I will of course choose Frankfurt, since that's the nearest to me. But you of course can choose whatever you want to use. And then for the plan type, I will choose hobby, since that's free. And I think that's all we need. And now I can click on create database. Now this will take a bit. So once it's done, I will come back to you. So now PlanetScale is done pretty much initializing. So what I will do right now is click on get connection string, click on create password, and now I get an .env with the database URL. So let me copy that and let me delete this old database URL and let me paste that I just copied. And then also for the schema.prisma, let me copy that and then let me open up my schema and let me delete it and paste what I've just copied. So now we have pretty much initialized Prisma, but now I also want to create my own models. So I only will have one model with the comments. So let me create a new model. Let's name it comment and let me open that. So the first thing I will have to do is give it a string, which will be an ID with the default of UUID. And then we'll also have a message, and the message will just be in string. And I also want to have a movie ID, which will also be of type string, and I want to have a created ad, and the created ad will be in date time with the default of now. That's actually all we need for Prisma. What I can do now is an npx prisma db push, and this will now pretty much push our schema to PlanetScale, and now our database is in sync with our Prisma schema, and now we can actually continue. So it tells us right now that we that it pretty much has generated our Prisma client. But before we can do anything, we first of all have to create pretty much a configuration file for Prisma, since in the development environment, you don't want to create every time a new Prisma client, every time pretty much Next.js or the HMR reloads. So inside of the app folder, you will create a new file called db.ts and paste this inside of here. Now just go to my GitHub and copy that, or Google best practices Prisma Next.js and just copy that. All this pretty much is it tells, or it pretty much creates a global Prisma file or a global Prisma pretty much access. So if we are in a development environment, we pretty much access the global Prisma client, but if we are in production environment, we just create the normal Prisma client. So I hope that's understandable. That's pretty basic stuff. You always have to do that. So this shouldn't be anything new if you are not new to Prisma. So once that's done, we can actually continue again with our page.tsx. So go again inside of your ID folder and inside of the page.tsx. And now the first thing I will actually want to do is first of all get the data. And now to do that, all you have to do is again create an async function. So let's do an async function get data. And now what you have to do inside of here is pretty much fetch the data or the comments. Right now we don't have any comments, so we only will get an empty array, but this will change once we create a few comments. So let's do a const data, which will be equal to await db, which I import from my db file, dot comment dot find many. And I want to find many pretty much where our movie ID, so let me do it like that, where our movie ID is equal to our params, or not our params, but our ID. Right now we don't get an ID, so right here I want to get an ID, and the ID will be of type string, just like that. What I also want to do is an order by, so let's do an order by, let's say created at, and I want to have it descending, just like that. Now the last thing I want to do is return our data. What I can do now is in our front end pretty much get the data. So let's do a const data, let's say await get data. And now I will again have to do two things. First of all, TypeScript complains and it tells us that we have to mark our function as async. So let's do that first of all. And then the second error is that I don't pass an argument for ID. So what I will have to do is again destructure my params first of all, and the type of params will be again an ID, which will be of type string. And then inside of here, I can just pass my params.id, just like that. So now I get my data, and now I can actually create the UI for that. So let me delete this return, and let me create a new return. Let's start off with a div, and let me style that. So let's give it a class name of rounded, which will be LG, and in border, and let's say padding of 3. Then inside of this div, let me create an h1 tag. Let me give a class name of text, which will be, let's say XL, and font, which will be semi-bold. Also, I want to give it a margin bottom of 5. Now, right here for a value, I will just say your opinion, just like that. Now, if I save that and go back to localhost 3000, and reload that right now, you will see we get an error, and that's because I have to restart my dev server. So let me run npm run dev. So now right here you pretty much see this your opinion, and I already see that I have a background color right here. I don't want that. So let me go to the layout and let me delete this background 100 and font medium, just like that. So I only have width 1/2. And again, if I go to the page.tsx, I think I can now actually continue. So under this h1 tag, let me create a new div tag. And inside of this div tag, let me create a form. So let me spell form correctly in that sense. And now the action will be just blank for now. So delete that. And now inside of this form, I will have a text area and I will have to give it a name. And for the name, let's just give it the name of comment. I won't need the rows and I won't need the ID and everything like that. So let me delete that. So I will only have the name in that sense. Now that looks good. Let me also give it a class name. So we'll have pretty much a width of full, border. We'll have a border of teal 500 and rounded, which will be LG, and in padding, which will be 2, just like that. Now that looks good for the text area. If I go back, pretty much right here, you see this text area with a border of teal. I will also have to create an input, which will be of type hidden. And inside of here, I want to pretty much get the ID. So the name will just be ID and the value will be params.id. So this input is hidden and all it does is pretty much stores the ID of the movie. So I will pretty much then later get it to post the data to our database. And now the last thing I will actually, I think, have to do is create a button. So let's do a button. And the type right here will be of submit, since we have a form which I want to submit. And let me give it a class name of bg_teal500. Let's give it a px of 4. Let's give it a py of 2. Rounded will be lg. And text should be white. If I now save that and go back, I will have to give it a value. I forgot that. So let's just say add comment, just like that. If I now go back, you will see pretty much our form with your opinion and text area and add comment. So now that looks good. Another thing I maybe want to do is add a placeholder for the text area. So let's go to the text area and let me add a placeholder of add your comment, just like that. If I now go back, I think that looks way better in my opinion. So now that looks good, and what I want to do now is also under the form, I want to pretty much map over my comments and show them. So under this form, let's create a new div element and let me style that. So let's give it a class name of margin top, which will be 5, flex, we also have a flex of call, and gap of, let's say, y of 3. Then inside of here, I will map over my data. So data.map, we'll have a post inside of here. And now let me just return that. Also, the cool thing you see right now, if I hover over data, we already get all the types. So I don't have to create any interfaces. And that's because Prisma works with TypeScript and I don't have to do any extra configuration. And now inside of this pretty much mapping, I want to create another div. I have to give it a key. So let's give it a key of post.id. And I want inside of here to pretty much show the message. So let's do in post.message, just like that. And if I now save that, you will see nothing, and that's okay. So now that looks good. Also, one thing I will actually have to do right now is again do a bit configuration. So if you can remember, pretty much every time I load data, if I don't add any configuration, the data is pretty much static. So the first request will be pretty much dynamic, but each subsequent request will be cached and I will get a cached value. But I don't want that. I want to get dynamic data. So what you will have to do is go on the top actually. So let me go completely on the top. And what I will do is an export const dynamic. And this will be equal to just a string where it will be just force dash dynamic. And with that, I pretty much just force this route, so this page.tsx, to always get dynamic data or fresh data in that sense. If I wouldn't do that right now, I would just get my cached data back, but I don't want that. So now that looks good in my opinion. And what I can do now is actually create pretty much our function to post the data to our database. And to do that, you will again have to create a new function. So let's create a new function called just async function, and let's name it post data, something like that. And now inside of this post data, I will pretty much get form data, and the form data is of type form data. Now let me open that function, and the first thing I will have to do right here is use server. Also, if you didn't know, this is something also new. This only works since Next.js 13.4. Also, it's currently in alpha, so it's not beta, or actually it isn't even stable. So definitely be cautious when using it. There are still bugs, and I even encountered a few bugs when I created my personal projects. So definitely bear that in mind. It's not really recommended to use it in production. But if I create this tutorial, why shouldn't I teach you the newest thing inside of Next.js? So that are server actions. And inside of here, you will have to use this use server keyword. So it pretty much tells React or Next.js in that sense that this action should only run on the server. And then inside of here, what I want to do now is actually pretty much post that data. So what I will do is in const data, which will be equal to await db dot comment dot create, and inside of here I will have to pass the data. Now the first thing I will have is the message, and for the message I want to get it pretty much through our form data. So what you will have to do is pretty much form data dot get, And what you want to get is the comment, because if you go back, we gave the text area a name of comment. So I pretty much get the value through this form data.get, just like that. And now we get pretty much a complaint, and that's because message is of type string. So let me do an as string. And now the next value we'll have is the movie ID, and I will get it again the same way. We'll get in form data dot pretty much get, and I want to get the ID. And again, this will be an as string. So now that looks good. I don't have to return anything. And now the last thing I will actually have to do right here in the text area, not in the text area, but in the form, I will have to give it an action. And for the action, this will just have the name of post data. And now in theory, actually everything should work. So let me reload everything, and it gives me an error right away, and it tells me to use server actions. Please enable the feature flag in your Next.js config. So what you have to do is, again, go to your nextjs.config.js, and then under the images, write experimental. And then for the experimental flag, you want to pretty much use server actions and set it to true. Now, again, you have to restart your dev server. So just run npm run dev and then reload the page again. So now everything works again, as you see right here. And now we can actually test out if the server actions work. So let me add a comment. So let's say hello from Next.js, and let me click on add comment. Now, I don't see anything, and you also don't see anything. That's quite annoying in that sense. And that's because we currently don't revalidate our pretty much loading loader, or how we load our data. And if I now reload the page, what you will see on the bottom is the data. But I want to pretty much make it work automatically. I don't want the user to, every time he posts a comment, I don't want him to click on the reload button. So to make it work, what you will have to do is, again, go to your page.tsx, and then inside of this post data, under your const data, you will have to do a revalidate path, which is imported from next cache. And inside of here, you want to do a /movie/ inside of this brackets ID. So with this revalidate path function, you pretty much revalidate the path for /movie/ID. So every time we create the data right here, we revalidate the path. So let me reload the page and let's test it out. So let's say just revalidate question mark, and let me click add comment. And as you see, it has revalidated automatically. I haven't reloaded anything, and everything works automatically. Now, still, this isn't perfect because I see two things I don't like. First of all, I don't see any pending state when we send a request, and I also don't see this disabled state. So let's actually fix that. So now to show the pending state, pretty much, you have to use this experimental use form status. Now, this is experimental, so it's not stable, and you will probably run into bugs, or pretty much the API will change, who knows in that sense. But all you have to do is pretty much import the use form status from React DOM. So let me copy that right now. Let me go back and let me just pretty much import that here from the top. So I import experimental underscore form status as use form status from React DOM. And now this is pretty much a hook. So what you will have to do right here inside of our function, let's just do a const pending, and this will be equal to use form status. Now, this in theory would work. So what I could do right now is probably change this add comment to ternary. So I will pretty much ask if pending is true, I want to return, let's say loading, ... And if this is false, let me just say, add comment, ... Now, if I save that and go back to localhost 3000, so right here you see we get an error, and it tells us that we are pretty much importing a component which needs status or state, and this only works as a client component and not as a server component. So now, I haven't really talked about this topic, but server components work pretty interesting in that sense that you have pretty much two types of server components. First of all, the server components that run on the server, and the pretty much use client components which run on the server and hydrate on the client. So with server components as they are right now, so this is pretty much the default template we have in server component, you can't use any state. And use form status is a hook which pretty much stores state. And to make state work, you of course have to hydrate that in the browser. So what pretty much React tells us, or Next.js tells us, is that we have to pretty much mark our component with use client. And now to make it work, what you will have to do actually is go inside of the app folder, and you will have to create a new folder called components. Now inside of here, you will just create a file. I will name it submit button.tsx. And now the interesting thing is with this component, I will have to mark it with use client. And with this, I pretty much tell Next.js that this component will pretty much use state. And that's why I mark it as use client. So what I will do right now is just, first of all, copy this import statement. So let me copy that and add it right here under this use client. And then I will do an export default function. So let's do an export default function. Let's name it submit button. And let me just open that function. Now for the return, I will just copy the button. So let me go back. And right here, let me copy this whole button. And let me paste it inside of here. And now instead of this button, I will just use the submit button component, which I import. And then in the submit button component file, I will again have to use the use pending hook. So let's do in const, we'll get the pending state, and this will be equal to use form status. So now we pretty much get the pending state from this use form status hook. And now in theory, if I go back, let me also delete this use form status inside of this page. Everything should now work. So if I now go back, and before I check that, let me also add in the disabled state. So disabled should only be true if pending is true. So just like that. If I now go back, you first of all see no error anymore. And if I add that and say pending state ? And click on add comment, you see we get this loading state and the button is disabled. So that works great. We now post data to our database. We pretty much reload the data, so we validate the data. We also have a pending state with the use pending hook, and we pretty much covered what use client is. Now let me again reiterate, use client is not running on the client. So many people are confused by it. I mean, the name pretty much tells you that this component runs on the client. And yes, this is also like half true. The component still runs on the server, but it hydrates on the browser, so on the client. So that's all it does. So with use client, I can pretty much use all state, so use state, use effect, and everything like that, which I can't use with server components in that sense. So with server components, you fetch data, and with use client components, you pretty much use interactivity. So you create states, use effects, and everything you need. So that's pretty much the gist of server components. You have the server where you fetch data, and then you have client components with which you add interactivity to your web application. So in theory, we are now done. I can now click on my logo and we get redirected not to our local host. I think that's because I did a bit of testing at the start. So let me go again to our layout.tsx. And the link should not be /sales, but just normal slash, so the index page. So let me again go back right here. Let me click on the logo, and we get redirected to our localhost 3000 with all of our movies. I can again click on a movie. So let me click on a new movie right here, Transformers. The image loads in the background. That's because it's a big image. I can add an opinion. So let's say, hey, how are you? I can click on add comment. This revalidates and is shown right here. I can again go back, can click on Guardians. This is almost instant. We have all of our data right here. So that works great. So now we are actually finished with the application, but we haven't done one pretty much fundamental thing, and that's error handling. So if you go to Next.js docs, there's pretty much a file on error handling. And you can create a file called error.js. And with this convention, you can pretty much handle one-time errors. So right here, they have an example. So what I will right now do is just copy that And now if I go back and go inside of my app folder, and inside of the app folder, I will create a new file called error.tsx. Now let me just paste what I've just copied from the docs. And if I now go back to localhost 3000 and reload everything, you still see that everything works. But what you could test out, for example, is go to the index page and let me just change the URL and add too many B's. So now the URL is not correct anymore. And if I reload the website, pretty much you see something went wrong. Try again. And with try again, I pretty much retry the request. So that's pretty much how to handle errors. So if I again change it to the correct URL and save that and reload the page, you see we don't get any error anymore. So with this convention, you pretty much can handle errors, and that's again pretty much segments. So right now this is pretty much a global error handler, but I could also create this error file inside of the movie folder or inside of the ID folder, and I could handle pretty much specific error states inside of each URL segment, if that's understandable. But now we actually have handled everything. We load data, we post data, when we create data, we pretty much also use pending states. We have error handling, we have dynamic values, we have nested layouts, nested routing. So actually everything works. We have also prefetching works, caching also works. So that's great. We are actually done now. So now the time has come to deploy our application to Vercel, and for that we have to create a new repository on GitHub. So I went on github.com/new, and right here I can create a new repository. Now the first thing I will have to do is create a name, so for our repository, and I will name our application remix tutorial, something like that. I will make the repository public, and now I can click on create repository. So right here, pretty much you see that GitHub has given us instructions how to pretty much push our code to GitHub. So to get started, open your terminal right here in your application, stop the dev server, let's clear everything. Let me maybe also make the terminal a bit bigger so you can see something. And now the first thing I will have to do is do a git init. This will initialize a new Git repository. Then the second step will be to do a git add dot. This will add everything. Then the next step right here you will see is to git commit. So let me copy that, paste that inside of here, and let's change the message to, let's say finished website. Then I will click enter. This will now pretty much commit all files. Then the next step is to create a branch. So let me copy that and paste that inside of here. Then the next step is to add a remote origin. So I will copy that and paste that inside of here. And now the last step is to push our code. So let me copy that again and paste that inside of here. Now you will see that GitHub will push our code. And if I go back to GitHub and pretty much reload the page, you will see right here the code. Now for me, some stuff is from yesterday and some stuff is from now. For you, everything should be pretty much from now, so don't bother with that. So now the next step is to deploy to Vercel, so let's go to Vercel. So now I'm at vercel.com/new, so the website from Vercel. And actually before I even continue and deploy our application, I want to check out a few things and check if everything has been done correctly. So let me close my terminal and let me actually open the page. So inside of our ID folder, let me open the page or the layout actually. And let me check out right here. As an authorization, I use the string. But why should I do that if I already created the env file for that? So let me go back to the page inside of our app folder. And let me just copy this process.env key and paste it right here inside of our layout route. So instead of using end string. Now that looks good. And now the next step I want to do is actually check out if ESLint complains. So to do that, let me again zoom in a bit. In your terminal, just run npm run lint, and this will just run our lint, ESLint service. And you right here already see an error, missing key prop for element, an iterator. That's in our page.tsx. So let me open that and let's see where the error is. Let me scroll down a bit. And right here you see we map over our results and I don't give it any key. So let me do that right now. And the key will be movie.id. Let me save that and let me again run our lint service. So npm run lint. Let's see if we get any errors. And as you see, no ESLint warnings or errors. So that looks good. So all you have to do now is again do a git add everything with a dot. Then do a git commit -m with a message. Let's say fixed errors. Then let's click enter. And then the last step is do a git push. So this will now again push our code to GitHub as you see right here. And if I go back to our GitHub, so now if you reload GitHub, you right here see we have the new commit with fixed errors. So now we can come back to Vercel and right here just click import on our repository called remix-tutorial. So I will click import. You already see right here we have a project name and framework preset, our root directory, so that looks all good. The only thing we have to add is an environment variable. So let's go back, let me close my terminal, let me zoom out a bit, and let me open the .env file, and let me copy both variables. Now right here I will just paste them inside of here, and now you see they have been added to Vercel, and now I can do the last step, which is to click on deploy. Now Vercel will deploy our application to its global network, and we will see either it will be successful or we will get an error. So once we get a result, I will come back to you. So after 23 seconds, we see we don't have a successful application, but we have an error. So let me scroll down and see what the error is. And right here it tells me Prisma has detected that this project was built on Vercel, which caches dependencies. This leads to an outdated Prisma client because Prisma's auto-generation isn't triggered. So to make sure that this does not happen, we can run the Prisma generate command during the build process. So before I do anything, let me just check this URL and see what they tell me right here. So let me paste that and let's see right here. So Vercel build dependency caching workaround. So right here they tell us what problem we have. I already know the problem since I read through it. And the solution, as you see right here, is to use a custom posts installed script. And all it does is pretty much generates our Prisma client every time we build our application new. So it's actually quite easy what you have to do. Copy this right here, this post install command, go back to your application, then open the package.json file. And now inside of the scripts object right here, under the lint, just paste it inside of here. Now again, we have to git add everything. So do a git add everything, do a git commit -m, let's say fixed Prisma, let's click enter, and let's do a git push. This will now again push our code to GitHub, and Vercel will automatically redeploy our application again. So if I go back to Vercel, you will see right here that we have again our upcoming building status with the commit message of fixed Prisma. I can click on it and right here see at what stage we are right now. So now let me wait again for a bit once that's finished, and then we will see the result. So it looks like we have a success. I don't see any errors, and so let me click on the pretty much URL. Right here we have our deployed application now. Let me zoom in a bit. And now you see everything works. We have our trending movies, we have the images, we have the title, we have the overview. And now let me click on a pretty much movie. So let me click on what's good. Let's click on Mission Impossible. You see something went wrong. So now let me check where the error is. So if you go, for example, to Vercel again, let me do that. You will see right here inside of the logs that they tell us right here, authentication failed against database, a server at that's planet scale. And all it tells us is pretty much that the provided credentials are not valid. Now, I'm not quite sure why we get this error, because in development everything worked. So right now I'm on planet scale, and what I will do right now is click on get connection string, create password right here. This will now create a new password, and what I will now do is just copy this database URL, this new database URL. And now what we can do is go back to Vercel, And then once in Vercel, click on Settings and then scroll down right here to somewhere Environment Variables. And then right here Database URL, what you will have to do is remove this, click on Remove, and then you will have to create a new one. And to create a new one, just paste it inside of here and then click Save. This will now save our new database URL. And once you have added your environment variables, what you will have to do now is click on Deployments and then click right here on the latest deployment, then on these three bars and click on Redeploy. This will then redeploy your application with the new environment variables. And now I have already done that, so that works for me. And now I can again click on our application. Let me zoom in a bit. And now everything works. So if I click on a movie, let me click on Mission Impossible. You see it loads right here. We have right here our description. I can add a comment. Hey, that's a test from production. And I can click on Add Comment. This loads right here. And we see right here our comment, which has been revalidated. I can click on my logo again. I will get redirected to our index page. I can click on another movie, so let me click on Transformers. I see already an old comment right here. Let me add a new comment. Hey, how are you, let's say from production. I can again click on Add Comment. This revalidates and we see it right here. So our application is done. We have now learned everything you need to know for Next.js. You have learned how routing works, so basic routing, nested routing, dynamic routing, and layout routes. You have learned how to load data, how to post data, how the metadata function works. So right now in theory you have learned everything, and we have also learned how to push our code to Vercel, how to deal with errors, and also how our application looks in a production environment. So now we are done. I hope you enjoy your day, and I will see you on the next video.